There's a moment most men know but almost nobody talks about. You're standing at a door, maybe it's a relationship, a job, a friendship, a family situation, and your hand is on the handle, and you just stand there. Not because you don't know what's on the other side is hurting you. You know. You've known for a while. You stand there because walking through that door feels like losing, like quitting, like something is wrong with you for even considering it, so you go back inside. Again. This series is for the man standing at that door. I want to be straight with you from the jump. Walking away is one of the most misunderstood acts a man can take. Our whole lives we've been handed two stories. The first one says a real man never quits. He grinds, he endures, he bleeds before he bends. The second, newer story says, cut everybody off, trust nobody, go lone wolf. Both of those stories will wreck you if you follow them blindly. The truth, the hard, useful truth, lives somewhere in the middle, and it requires something neither of those stories demands. Honest self-examination. Not blame, not bitterness. Just a man, alone with himself, asking real questions. Over the next 10 segments, we're going to walk through this thing properly. Why we stay when we shouldn't, what it costs us, how to know when leaving is the right call, and most importantly, how to do it in a way that builds your character instead of corroding it. Because here's the thing I've come to believe, sometimes the bravest, most disciplined thing a man can do is let go. If you're out here looking for solid ground, not noise, subscribe and stay with us. We're just getting started. Let me tell you something about construction. When I was younger, I worked alongside a crew foreman named Dale. Ornery old guy, smart as a whip. One winter, we poured a foundation that started showing cracks before the first frost. Bad soil prep. Wasn't going to hold. Everybody on the crew knew it. But the project manager didn't want to tear it out. You know why? Because we'd already spent 3 weeks and a lot of money on it. He said, "We've put too much into this to stop now." Dale looked at him and said, "Son, that money's already gone whether you pour more on top of it or not. The only question is how much more you want to lose." That right there is the sunk cost trap. And it doesn't just live on job sites. It lives inside every man who stayed somewhere way past the expiration date because of everything he already invested. Years in a relationship, years at a company, years in a friendship or a family dynamic. We confuse our past investment with a reason to keep investing. We think, I've already given so much, it would all be meaningless if I left now. But here's the hard truth Dale taught me that day. The time, the energy, the love, the sacrifice, it's already spent. It belongs to the past. The only real question is the same one Dale asked. How much more do you want to lose? This isn't callousness. This isn't cold math. It's clarity. And clarity is one of the most valuable things a man can have. The sunk cost trap keeps men chained not to something real, but to a story they're telling themselves, that leaving means it was all worthless. It wasn't worthless, it was a lesson. And lessons cost something, that's okay, all right, let's go a little deeper now. Because the sunk cost thing, that's the surface explanation. Underneath it, there are usually two things doing the real work: fear and identity. Fear is obvious enough. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of what people will think, fear of confirming your worst suspicion about yourself, that maybe you're the problem. These fears aren't weaknesses, by the way. They're normal. They're human. The problem isn't that you have them. The problem is when they're running the show without you knowing it. Then there's identity. This one's sneakier. A lot of men, especially men who've carried responsibility their whole lives, their sense of who they are gets tangled up in their roles. I am a husband. I am the provider at this company. I am the one who held this family together. I am the loyal friend who never walks away. Now, those aren't bad things to be. But when your entire identity is stitched to a particular person, place, or role, the idea of leaving doesn't just feel like change. It feels like death, like you'd be destroying yourself along with it. The psychologist Carl Jung talked about something called the persona, the mask we wear, the role we play for the world. The danger isn't wearing the mask. The danger is forgetting it's a mask, forgetting there's a man underneath it who exists independent of any circumstance. You are not your job title. You are not your relationship status. You are not the role you've been playing. You are the man underneath all of that, and that man. He goes with you wherever you walk and through the door or back inside. He's the one you need to get honest with. I want to talk about loyalty for a minute because I think it's one of the most noble qualities a man can have, and also one of the most frequently weaponized against him. Real loyalty is earned and it's mutual. It's a bond between people who've proven themselves to each other over time. It costs something, but it also gives something back. It builds. Like a good truck, it runs hard, requires maintenance, but gets you where you need to go. What some men carry around, though, isn't loyalty. It's obligation dressed up in loyalty's clothes. And there's a world of difference between the two. Obligation says, I have to stay. If I leave, I'm a bad person. If I leave, I've failed. If I leave, I prove that I can't be counted on. Real loyalty asks, is this relationship, this situation, this dynamic, does it still have the integrity to be worth my commitment? A loyal man doesn't abandon a leaking ship, but a wise man knows there's a point where the ship is gone, and staying isn't loyalty anymore. It's just drowning alongside the wreckage. Here's the mirror moment, and I need you to look into it honestly. Are you staying out of genuine love and genuine belief that things can be repaired? Or are you staying because you're afraid of what it says about you if you leave? Because one of those is character, and one of those is fear wearing a noble disguise. Self-betrayal is quiet. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. It shows up as a slow erosion, a man who shrinks himself year after year to maintain peace in a situation that was never at peace to begin with. At some point, loyalty to yourself has to be part of the equation. Now we get into the practical territory, because everything I've said so far could easily be misused. A man looking for an excuse to run will find one in any philosophy. So let me be direct about something. This is not about the first hard season. This is not about the rough patch or the disagreement or the stretch where everything feels heavy. Seasons change. Hard times test things. But hard times also build things. What we're talking about is when the pattern is the problem. Here are some honest diagnostic questions. Sit with them. Don't rush. 1. Have you communicated the problem clearly more than once and in good faith, and nothing has moved? Not because the other person is evil, but because the dynamic simply cannot or will not change. 2. Are you consistently smaller in this situation than you are anywhere else in your life? Do you feel like you're constantly shrinking, walking on eggshells, or managing someone else's volatility at the cost of your own stability? 3. Has the relationship, whether it's personal or professional, become one-directional? Are you the one who always carries, always gives, always adjusts? 4. And the hardest one, if your son, your brother, your best friend described this same situation to you, what would you tell him to do? That last question. Men. That last question will cut right through the fog. We hold ourselves to impossible standards of endurance that we'd never ask of the people we love. If you'd look your son in the eye and tell him to walk away, then sit down and ask yourself why you're still standing there. The signs aren't always a blow-up. Sometimes they're a quiet accumulation of days where you felt unseen, undervalued, or simply gone. Those days add up. Don't ignore the math. Now I'm going to ask something of you that's harder than anything physical. I'm going to ask you to look at your own part in this. Not because you're to blame for everything. Not because the other person or situation is off the hook, but because a man who doesn't do this work will just carry the same chains into the next relationship, the next job, the next chapter. Different name on the door, same trap. Jung called it shadow work. The process of examining the parts of yourself you'd rather not look at. The stuff you've buried. The patterns you've inherited. The wounds you've been working around your whole life without realizing it. For a lot of men, the reason they stay in situations that diminish them isn't just fear or sunk cost. It goes back further. Maybe you grew up watching someone you loved stay in something painful out of duty. That became your model. Maybe early on, love was conditional. You had to earn it, and leaving meant losing it permanently. So now, even as an adult, abandonment hits different for you. Deeper. Maybe you were taught that a man's value is what he can endure, that asking for something better is weakness. These aren't excuses, they're roots, and you can't cut what you can't see. Here's the practical piece. Get a notebook. Write down the pattern. Not just this situation, but the pattern across your life. Where else has this dynamic shown up? What does that tell you? You're not looking for someone to blame, including yourself. You're looking for the wiring. Because once you see the wiring, you can change it. A man who understands himself is dangerous in the best possible way. He can't be manipulated by his own blind spots anymore. That's the goal. All right, you've done the honest work. You know it's time. Now what? Because here's where a lot of men stumble. They leave, but they leave wrong. They blow it up. They go cold and silent. They wait until they're so full of resentment that the exit becomes ugly, destructive, something they're not proud of later. Or they half leave, one foot out the door for months, emotionally checked out but still physically present, which is its own kind of cruelty. Walking away with integrity is a skill. It requires discipline. It's not dramatic. It doesn't require an audience. First, clarity before conversation. Get absolutely clear in your own mind that this decision has been made, not as a threat, not as a negotiation tactic. Once you're clear, then you communicate it, calmly, directly, without excessive explanation or justification. You don't owe a monologue, you owe honesty. Second, clean cuts heal better than jagged ones. Be as straightforward as the situation allows. Dragging it out, for their sake, you tell yourself, usually just prolongs suffering for everyone, including you. A clean exit is a kindness, even when it doesn't feel like one. Third, expect turbulence and don't let it move you backward. When you walk away from something, especially something people in your life expected you to stay in, there will be pushback, guilt trips, anger, silence, people testing whether you mean it. Hold the line, not with cruelty, with quiet resolve. Fourth, no scorched earth. Don't tear down what you're leaving. Don't badmouth, don't retaliate, don't burn it to the ground on your way out. The way you leave says more about your character than almost anything else. Walk away like a man who knows his worth. Quietly, cleanly, with his head level. I'm not going to lie to you about what comes next. Even when the decision to walk away is right, maybe especially then, it's going to hurt. There will be grief. Real grief. The kind that doesn't care how logical your decision was. You'll miss things. You'll second-guess yourself at 2 in the morning. You'll have days where you wonder if you should have stayed and tried harder. That's not weakness. That's what it means to have invested yourself in something real. Only shallow men walk away from things without feeling it. The guilt is harder for most men than the grief. Grief runs its course. Guilt likes to stay. It'll remind you of the good times. It'll play the highlight reel of every moment you could have done better. It'll whisper that if you'd just been more patient, more forgiving, more something, maybe it would have worked. Here's what I want you to understand about guilt. Some of it is legitimate and worth listening to. If you genuinely contributed to problems, own it. Learn from it. That's useful guilt, the kind that makes you better. But a lot of what men feel after a hard exit is phantom guilt. The same guilt that kept you stuck in the first place, now following you out the door. That guilt isn't information. It's just an old habit. You don't have to obey it. Grief and guilt are not stop signs. They're mile markers. They tell you that you passed through something significant. Keep driving. Fill the space that opens up with something constructive. Exercise, projects, service to other people. Not to avoid the feelings, but to keep building while you feel them. Men heal by doing, not by pretending they're fine, not by collapsing, by moving, slowly, honestly, forward. There's something nobody tells you about the other side of a hard exit. It's quiet. And at first, that quiet feels wrong. When you've spent a long time managing turbulence, in a relationship, in a toxic workplace, in a family dynamic that always demanded something from you, peace can feel suspicious. Like the calm before a storm you haven't spotted yet. Give it time. That quiet is not emptiness, it's space. Maybe for the first time in years, it's actually your space. What tends to emerge in that space, if a man does the honest work we talked about, is something worth talking about. Clarity, a kind of personal authority that you can't manufacture or shortcut. The knowing that you faced a hard thing, you didn't run from it prematurely, and when the time came, you handled it with integrity. That's not a small thing. That's character forged under pressure. Jung talked about the process of individuation, a man becoming over the course of his life more fully and authentically himself. Every time you make a hard, honest choice, especially one that costs you something, you move further along that road. You shed a version of yourself that was defined by someone else's expectations or your own unchecked fears. What's left is more solid, more real. You'll find that your tolerance for things that diminish you naturally drops, not because you become arrogant, because you become acquainted with what genuine respect feels like, starting with your own self-respect. And from that foundation, you build differently. You choose differently. The next relationship, the next commitment, the next chapter, it starts from a man who knows himself. Not perfectly, but honestly. That's the only foundation worth building on. The ground you were standing on before? It was borrowed. This ground is yours. We started this thing at a door. A man with his hand on the handle, standing still because walking through it felt like defeat. I hope by now you can see that the real defeat was never in leaving. The real defeat is in staying surrendered to a life smaller than you were built for and calling it loyalty or strength or just how things are. Here's where I want to land this plane. The goal was never to become a man who walks away easily. Disposability, cynicism, the "I don't need anyone" posture. That's not wisdom. That's just a different kind of wound talking. The goal is to become a man who builds things worth staying in. Relationships built on mutual respect and honest communication. Work that aligns with his values. Friendships with other people doing the same honest work on themselves. A daily life he chose, not one he just defaulted into or was too afraid to leave. That man doesn't have to walk away as often because he stopped signing up for things that were wrong for him in the first place. And when something does need to end, he handles it. Not perfectly, but with the dignity of someone who knows who he is. Build that man, piece by piece, decision by decision. That's the whole project. It's not dramatic. It's not a highlight reel. It's a man in a garage at a workbench, doing the quiet work that nobody sees, and knowing that the thing he's building is his own life. That's worth showing up for every single day. If anything in this series landed for you, if it gave you something to think about or helped you name something you've been carrying, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're at. I read them. And if this is the kind of content you value, subscribe. We'll keep building this thing together.